Welcome to Azure.
Take the right stream probably.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah, all good. We can see you.
Don't do that.
No, you probably want to use the PowerPoint, or you are going to use the video first and then PowerPoint? Jump to the PowerPoint.
Rivut, you want to stream the right one?
We cannot see the PowerPoint.
I have shared the PowerPoint already. Let me see if I can share it once again. Can you see that?
Yeah, this one I can see that.
Perfect. So let me just get the video on the different screen. Thanks a lot, Nilesh, for having me. Thanks a lot, Microsoft Singapore User Group, for having me. So it is a pleasure to speak at the community event. So when I was approached by Nilesh that, hey, we are running these kind of webinars, I was like, hey, I can go back to community and speak about, and especially Singapore, because I don't know how many of the attendees know that I stayed in Singapore for almost like 2 years, and it was a very beautiful part of my life. So without much ado, let's start with the topic today, and I call it as let's migrate that puppy. So you want to migrate your app to the cloud. That's a fantastic news. However, the journey to the cloud can be overwhelming considering so many vendors, so many technologies, and so many options. My name is Mayur Tendulkar. I currently work as a uh, senior customer engineer at Microsoft India in a team called Azure Fast Track, and my job is to spread love about Azure. So in this webinar, I'm going to show you how to, how we can migrate an application which is running on premises to the cloud, and what are the options that we have, and all that stuff. So without wasting much time, let's get started. By the way, I have, or Nilesh have already shared my endpoints on the meetup, and my Twitter handle is also there. So you can reach out to me anytime if you have any questions. Also, a little bit information about this weird setup. I have this laptop over here. So I'm looking at you directly at this moment, and I have this my primary monitor over here. So while working, probably I will be looking at the monitor and not at you. So, but don't get offended, by the way. Okay, so let's get deep dive into this topic. So this next slide. Yep. So I don't know how many of you know this place. So this place is, Marina Bay Sands Hotel, and this is the picture that I took from Microsoft Office. At that time, Microsoft was having offices in One Marina Boulevard building, and this was the view that we were getting from the office. So as I mentioned, that I stayed in Singapore for almost like 2 years, and I still remember how I came to Singapore and how I came back from back to India from Singapore. So when I got a job at Microsoft Singapore in the team called Global Black Belts, I packed one bag and I was like, hey, this is my suitcase. I'm going to Singapore. Yay! I went to Singapore, and Microsoft was like, probably I'm getting my entire family over there. So they booked a nice hotel. I was there for a few days. Then I found an apartment, moved over there, stayed over there for almost like 18 months. And then what happened is I was like, hey, I want to go back to India. So I had to, start packing my bags, and then I realized, hey, I have bought so much stuff in Singapore. So I bought like, a home theater system. I bought like utensils. I bought so many electronic gadgets, clothes, and so much stuff in Singapore. And I was like, I want to move that to India now. So coming to Singapore was easy, but now going back to India was like difficult task for me. Like how to pack all of these and how to migrate all of this to India. So I was like wondering what to do. But then there was this movers and packers and movers, right? We have this concept. So there is this agency which is like, we will help you out. What we will do is we will come to your place, we will see what you have. That is, we will assess what you have, and then we will help you to migrate that stuff to India. I was like, wow, that's good. I did not know that something like this already has. So they came to my place and they did assessment, and they're like, hey, these are the perishable items. Do you still want to carry? These are the items probably like too bulky. Do you still want to carry? So like they gave me a checklist option. So they give me an assessment report, and I'm like, perishable items, nah, probably I don't want to. Probably I will give it away. Then there was some furniture. I was like, getting another table at home, probably not a good idea. I have this standing desk over here, so I already using it. I don't want another desk over here in India. So I thought that probably I will give it to my one of my friend over there in Singapore, and I did that way. And but then I bought a music system back home to India, so I had to pack. So these guys helped me to pack. Now, what did I learn from this? So, whenever you have to migrate, okay, you have to have a plan. You have to have an action item so that you know the migration becomes smooth. So, what happened? The guys, I still remember, the guys came to my place on 20th September last year. My flight was on 25th September to Pune. I came back to Pune, and on I remember it was 7th or 8th October, the items were delivered to my home. So everything like box packed. So the way that they handle, like first assessing what all the items that I have, then making a plan, then telling me that, hey, these are the boxes. Like I had like 10 big boxes, and they're like, we will be shipping it tomorrow, and we will be delivering it to you once you reach your home, because you probably need to sign on some of the customs document. You need to make a place or space in your home for these boxes as well. They're like, wow, so much things to do, right? So to give you some idea, the same thing you have to do if suppose you are migrating an application to the cloud. You have to do the assessment. You have to make a plan. You have to have a checklist. Like, okay, this is what you have to do. So we are going to go through that phase of migrating an application. So let's get started again. So when I say that, hey, we want to migrate, we want to do assessment, we want to plan, we want to make sure that, hey, we are migrating in a right fashion, we are delivering it to the customer, right? So there are different approaches. And what Microsoft has done is Microsoft has created a framework around it, which helps you to migrate your applications to the cloud. Not just applications, but data as well as servers. So this is called as Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework for Azure. It helps you to define a strategy. It helps you to plan your migration. It helps you to, make sure that your subscription is ready for that migration and adopt the cloud environment. So we are going to focus on some of the aspects over here and see how we can migrate the application to the cloud. Now, when we start migrating applications, the first thing that we have to understand is why we are migrating. Not just at migrations, whenever you are trying to learn something, whenever you are spending time on something, whenever you are cooking something, anything, just ask why, and probably you will have more details about it, and you will find a passion over there. Okay, interest over there. For example, when I'm migrating the application, why I'm migrating that application? Because maybe the hosting data center where all the physical servers are residing is getting deprovisioned because of various reasons. For example, there could be a fire outage. By the way, today I had a fire outage, and my entire building power supply is down, and I'm running on a backup. So I have like few minutes left. I hope we will not get disrupted while this presentation is going on. But yeah, you got the point, right? So you need to plan that probably there are disruptions, so you want to move the data center to the cloud. There could be license of the software that you are using, that your application is using, is getting expired, right? So probably there will not be any support anymore. Companies are also getting merged, acquired, or simply the company wants to save on the capital expenses. They just want to move their application to the cloud. So you should always ask the question why. Once you have the answer to the why, you can understand the motivation, and probably you can also get the timeline for that. For example, if a company says that, hey, I want to move to the cloud in the next month. Okay, why do you want to do that? Okay, because the data center we lost that data center. So we want to move physical data center to the cloud. So that's the main requirement. Okay, so you have to understand the motivations first. The second thing that you have to understand for the current application or current data center or current, whatever that you are moving is the landscape. So let's say consider in case of an application. Now, let's say I have a company, Microsoft. Okay, I have, let's say, about 100 applications which I want to migrate. There could be a data center that I could directly move, or I can go one by one for each application. So if I'm going with each and every application, it makes it makes mandatory to understand all the application details. For example, what is the name of the application? Let's say today we are going to build an application and use an application called My Devices, which helps to identify the devices that are tagged to an employee. For example, when I join Microsoft, Microsoft gives me a laptop. So they want to track which laptop is with whom or who is having multiple laptops, something like that. So you can track that. So this is the application that we have. So you have to find the use cases. You have to find the features and different versions of that application. So note it down. The second thing that you need to understand about the application is the technology stack. So what is the application type, first of all? Is it a web application? Is it a API application, and these APIs are being consumed by mobile devices, or a console application? What language is being used? Whether it's the C#, whether it's the Java, how is it? And how is it hosted? Is it hosted in IIS, or is it like running off any other web server? You also need to understand the deployment models. So whether the company is using CI/CD pipeline, or whether it's just a Xcopy, like you build it, you get the output, and you put it on the web server. How do you do it? And you have to understand if suppose there are any third-party libraries or integration being used in that application. For example, you might be using some third-party controls like Telerik or Syncfusion. You might be using some third-party libraries which are going into the GAC, right? So you have to understand these minor details as well. Now, when you are migrating, you also need to understand the current utilization. So the devices or My Devices kind of application, you probably use like once in a day or twice in a day, where when an employee joins, you just assign a device and you forget about it. Okay, but there could be an application like HR where people are using it heavily at 9 a.m. for checking and 5 p.m. for checkout, right? Or there could be seasonal utilization. For example, let's say there is a new year coming up, so I'm going to apply for leave. So everybody is like trying to apply for a leave or trying to apply for tickets, something like that. So there could be like predictive and unpredictive utilization as well. So you need to consider that factor as well. And the next is you have to understand the existing assets. You have to consider the existing assets that you have. So for example, my application is running on a virtual machine. So you might have invested like $1,000, $2,000 on that box. You might have also bought some networking devices. You must have bought some licenses. So let's say you bought Windows license, SQL Server license, SharePoint license. So when moving to the cloud, does it make sense to just throw away these licenses? No, probably you may want to utilize these licenses when you move to the cloud. And finally, you have to assess the team culture. So whether this team is technology focused. For example, I'm a .NET person. I would love to work on .NET, not on Java, probably. Whether this particular team is process focused, that is like for everything there should be a CI/CD pipeline, there should be approval workflow, something like that. Or whether this team is early adopters. That means there is a .NET Core 6 coming up. Hey, let's go ahead and start using it. So you have to understand the team culture as well. So this is like current landscape that you have to understand when moving that application. Now, let's see how we can migrate one application to the cloud considering all these different points, and first get introduced to the application itself. So as I mentioned, I built this simple application which is called as My Devices. It is a company asset management tool which helps to register devices for employees. So anybody can log in, just say that, hey, I have a Lenovo X1 Yoga, the serial number which is at the back of the device, and asset tag which a company might generate automatically, or you may want to enter it manually, and then create, and it will just save all this information in SQL Server database. This application is publicly accessible over internet, so anybody can use it, as in my employees can use it. At this moment, I haven't made only company people can access it, but anybody can access it. And then this application is built using ASP.NET Core and SQL Server as a backend. This is a web app running inside a IIS on a virtual machine, and database is running on SQL on the same virtual machine. Now, we want to migrate this application, but before that, let me quickly show you how it looks like. So this is my virtual machine, and let me just quickly go. This is the local host. This is the application. I say login. This is my email ID. This is my password. Login. And okay, there is nothing as such. I need to say devices. This is a sample app, so you can understand, right? So I haven't created a shortcut over there. Sorry about that. But yeah, so we have 3 devices listed over here. So this is a simple application which I want to migrate to the cloud. Now, let's come back to our presentation. So when we want to migrate to the cloud, as I said, that there are like so many options that we have that we might get confused, like, okay, where exactly I should go, right? So the best part is Microsoft documentation has created this decision matrix, this decision tree, which can help you to, make a right decision. So for example, if suppose you have to migrate that application within 1 month, so probably re-architecting doesn't make sense. So you just want to rehost this or redeploy. So you can think about the migration, so lift and shift. So you can put it in a virtual machine as is. If suppose you don't want to manage the virtual machine or the infrastructure, you may want to go in a platform service. So in that case, you have app services, right? If you're like, hey, this application needs to be scalable, this application needs to be re-architectured because we have time, we have enough capacity, we have developers, and we want to utilize the microservices architecture, probably you can go ahead with the Kubernetes service. If suppose this application is like just one time you are going to use it, and that to like fire and forget, like one function which is just you call and you just forget about it. Probably you want to go in Azure Functions or Logic Apps. For example, this is actually a case, right? So I launched the application, my devices, I entered the model, I entered the serial number, I entered asset tag, I say save, and it says, okay, device is registered. That's it, nothing else, right? So I could probably use Azure Functions over here. So I can create an Azure function which will just take these parameters, insert it into the database, and shut down the machine, right? And whenever somebody calls that function again, start the machine, execute, and shut down. So I will be paying only for that particular execution time. So we have these many different options, and we have this matrix over here which can help us to decide where exactly we want to move. Now, I'm going to cover a couple of options over here, and I believe Nilesh will probably take it in the next couple of sessions, like how to migrate this to other options. So we will think about it later. But yeah, so let's talk about first option, VM on Azure. So when I say VM, consider it as a compute on Azure. That means just like you have a physical server at home, you have a physical server in the cloud. So you can install anything that you want. So it's a Windows or Linux machine, and you can install IIS, you can install Tomcat, you can install SQL, you can install MySQL. It's all up to you. Also, these virtual machines are optimized for compute. For example, let's say you are going to transcode video files, right? Yeah, it's go for compute. Probably you may require a memory or general purpose machine. So there are optimization available for these virtual machines, and you can select a particular virtual machine. Now, consider this. You want to use Visual Studio virtual machine, and you don't want to waste time. So you can just go to Azure Marketplace and say that, hey, I want a virtual machine image of Visual Studio, and it will create a virtual machine for you within few minutes. So there are pre-image software images available on Marketplace. There are like hundreds of them are available. So you can just go and say, hey, I want virtual machine for Visual Studio, and you will have that virtual machine with all the tools properly configured and installed. You can create your own virtual machine image, and you can sell it on Marketplace if it makes sense. You can also use the reserved instance or hybrid benefit. So as I mentioned, you just bought the Windows license, you just bought the SQL Server license. So does it mean that you need to throw it away when you are going to the cloud? No, you don't need to. What you can do is you can say that, hey, I'm going to use these virtual machines for 1, 2, 3 years, and I'm going to bring my own license. And in that case, you can save on the bills as well. Now, remember one thing. When I say virtual machine on Azure, it is an infrastructure as a service. That means what? You have to manage everything. Consider it like you're having a server on premises or at your place, at your home, right? So when you have when you have a machine at your home, you format it, you install Windows or Linux, you install everything. You have to do the patching, you have to do the maintenance, you have to do everything on your own. So you get the freedom, but then you also get the responsibility. So that's the virtual machine on Azure. Now let me quickly show you how you can create a virtual machine in Azure and how you can deploy an application over there. So here I have my dashboard. So by the way, this is Microsoft Edge. Probably you already are aware of this. And what I have done is I said, hey, install that app. So I have this Azure app running on my Windows. So here I can go to, let's say, dev environment, and I say that, hey, I want to create a virtual machine. Okay, so I can create a virtual machine scale set, or I have this quick start over here, which is Windows Server 2016 data center. Or I can say that, hey, I want to create something of Visual Studio 2019 latest. So what happens is I can select this and I can say that, hey, I want to create a virtual machine, okay, with Windows Server 2019 64-bit edition, and I say create. And this is a virtual machine image that we have, and it will go ahead and create a virtual machine for us in Azure. It takes some time. You have to provide some details. So this is basically an image that I was telling you, right? So you need to select the resource group. You have to give the virtual machine name. You have to select the redundancy. You have to select the size. You have to, enable RDP access, blah, blah, blah. There are like so many things that you have to do to create that virtual machine, but that you have to do only once. And once that VM is provisioned, you can just RDP and use it. The best part, it takes only 5 minutes to configure it, and probably 5 or 10 minutes to create that virtual machine. And here I already have that virtual machine running. So I'm showing you the application running directly off this virtual machine, which is hosted in Azure. So that means the same virtual machine that you have on premises, you can just bring it as it is to the cloud and attach it to this Azure. And you can say that, hey, do just a port forwarding. Whatever comes to port 80, go to send this to this particular port 80 of this virtual machine. Now, what I have done is I have just created a IIS, installed IIS over here, and I created this application called as assets. So this is my website assets, and everything is here in this particular web application. Now, to give you some idea, here I can go. This is my URL of my virtual machine to show you how actually it looks like. Here, let's come. This is my virtual machine. And what I have done is, this is the IP address. And for that IP address, I have given a DNS name. So this is a static IP address that I have selected so that it remains constant. Okay. And I have selected, I want to connect to through RDP. And this is the DNS name that I have given. So I can connect to this virtual machine, RDP into it, and I can access it. Plus, I have also said that port 80 is allowed on this virtual machine. So let me just show you. I guess this is in networking. Yeah. So port 80 is allowed. That means I can, come over here and access this website. So let me just log into this machine. And here also devices. Ta-da, we have the same 3 devices. Let me just register a new device. Let's say I just bought Samsung Galaxy S20. The serial number is and let's say the asset tag is 3456. Okay, and let's say create. So I just added Samsung Galaxy S20. Now, to show you that this is the same website, I will just launch it over here, and let's say refresh. Ta-da! It's here. Yeah. It's magic, right? No, it's not magic. It's the same website I'm accessing over port 80 HTTP. Now, you can migrate this same virtual machine to Azure and use it as it is. So that's the beauty. You can use virtual machine scale set. So let's say thousands of people are coming to your website because of popular demand. So you can say that, hey, I want to increase the number of virtual machines depending on, let's say, scale factor. And you can have multiple virtual machines provisioned for you as and when load increases. So you can do that. So that's one way. So let's go back to the presentation. So that's virtual machine for us. So we just saw the demo of virtual machine and how we can, run the same application on a virtual machine. The second option that we have is a web app. It's a fully managed platform as a service. What does it mean? That, hey, I'm going to give you a virtual machine. I'm going to install Windows on it or Linux on it. I'm going to handle security, patching, scaling. You just manage your application. So you just install. So it's just like, when you install a WordPress, something like that. It's just like that. So you are installing application on a virtual machine and you don't care about that virtual machines. So something like that. It allows you to quickly build web and APIs in the cloud. So you can choose your technology stack. It could be ASP.NET, ASP.NET Core, Node.js, Java, Python. There are like already many more supported. So you can select your technology stack and accordingly the virtual machine is provisioned or the web app is provisioned for you. It also supports CI/CD. So for example, if suppose you make any code changes in HTML file and you save it and commit it to or push it to Git, Git will automatically build the application and automatically deploy it to the web application. And web application will show you the new result. So that is, excuse me, so that is also possible. It also has deployment slots. What is the deployment slot? So many websites do it. So for example, you can go to Microsoft.com, which is a primary site, and there will be Microsoft-test.com, which is a secondary site. 80% traffic goes to Microsoft.com, 20% traffic goes to Microsoft-test.com. Okay, so this is just to gauge how people feel about your website. So when they came to your website, they feel, okay, nothing is changed as such, but you have added new feature. So you can get confident that, hey, this is not a buggy release. Then you can migrate or move that test environment to production. So consider deployment slot are just like staging environments that you have. And it also scales on rules. So you can say if, let's say the CPU utilization is this much, if memory utilization is this much, you can increase the number of instances. So you can say, I want 100 virtual machines. So something like that, you can do that. And it is backed by 99.95% SLA. So without wasting much time, let's see how we can create a web app and how we can migrate the existing application to a web app. So let me go back to the environment over here, the Azure portal. And here I say that, hey, I want to create a web app. So when I say web app, I need to give a couple of details. So let's say the name is my alias 123, something like that. It's available. It by default gives you Azure Websites.net at the end, but you can add your custom domain as well. How do you want to publish? You can publish by code, or you can publish as a Docker container, or later on you can have a CI/CD pipeline as well. So you can do that. And runtime stack. So you can see these very different options you have. You can select .NET, Core, ASP.NET, Java. You can say Node, PHP, Python, Ruby. So if suppose I select Ruby, it will become Linux. If suppose I select Node, I have option to use Linux or Windows. And if suppose I say .NET Core, by default it's Windows, but you can also select Linux. So that's that. So you have that option. So you can select these different options over here, and you can say review and create, and it will create a web app. It takes about a minute or two to create this web app. So I have already created a web app. So let me just launch it. So this is the web app that I have created. You can see. And this is the URL. Let me just copy this, and you can see you can publish it via FTP. You can have the deployment center where you can select that, hey, I want to deploy from Jenkins or GitHub, or source control you can select, Bitbucket as well, or how you want to do a manual deployment. So you can also submit a zip file, which you shouldn't be doing, and deploy your application over here. But yeah, in certain cases it is also doable. And This is a deployment slot that I talked about. So consider these as a staging environment. So this is my production environment, and I can say, hey, I want to add a slot, which is, let's say, a test slot, and let me add. So what it does, it creates another virtual machine for me, another slot for me where I can deploy another version of an application. 80% traffic goes to the production environment, 20% can go to the test environment. And if I'm like, hey, the test is successful, let me swap these environments and I can, move the application which is a test in productions. This might take a minute or so. Okay, it's done already. So as I said, I can say that, hey, 20% traffic should come over here, 80% should go to production. So that is also doable. And then later on, I can say swap the slot. So I can do that as well. So let me quickly show you this. So this is my web app. Let me say login. Let me provide my credentials. Ta-da. Devices. And we have these devices over here. It's not a magic again, because I'm using the same SQL Server database over here, where I'm just changing the front ends. That's it, nothing fancy. But you got the idea. Now, the question is, I have an application in a virtual machine. I want to move over here. How I can do that? You can do that pretty easily. So we have this tool. Let me show you the tool first. So the name of the tool is App Migration Microsoft. So this is app migrate to Azure App Service. And here you can provide the URL of your website. Let me do one thing. Let me type in my blog URL, mayurtendulkar.com, and let's see assess. So it's going to my website, doing some analysis, and it says that, hey, this particular website is in PHP. Some ASP.NET thing. It is hosted on GoDaddy, WordPress, also have IIS, Nginx, all these details. And it says that your site's framework and hosting model is fully supported. That means I can start migrating right now. So what you have to do is, when you click on this, it will ask you to download this particular tool. You have to install it on your virtual machine where your application is hosted, and it will start the migration. So let me show you how it is done. So I have already downloaded this tool, and this tool is here, Service Migration Assistant. So it goes through the IIS. It says that, hey, you have this website assets. Do you want to migrate? Yes, I want to migrate. So it goes ahead and does a scan, and it tells us all the criteria. So am I using Azure filters, any global modules, TCP ports? I'm using any virtual directories, what is the authentication type? So all these details, nitty-gritties, it shows you over here. And if suppose anything fails, you can go ahead and fix that. Okay. And if here you get everything green, that means this application can be moved to the Azure easily. So let's say next, it will ask me to log into my browser. Let me just quickly log in. Ta-da. Okay, so we have signed into this. So let's come back. Okay, so it asks for a migration project. I can create a migration project which helps me to migrate multiple resources at one time, or I can just say skip. I just want to migrate my application to my internal subscription. Resource group, let's say I want to use the existing one, which is Dave MG that I created. Let's say the destination site name is MSSUG migrate. Okay, so it is going to create this website, and let's say I'm going to create this in Southeast Asia. Okay, I'm going to skip the database setup because I already have my database running in the cloud, so I can use it. Or if suppose you want to keep the database as it is, you can create a hybrid connection, or later on you can use similarly, just like I'm using this tool to migrate the application, you can use a tool called DMA, Database Migration Assistant, which can help you to migrate this databases to the cloud. And let's say migrate. So hopefully within 5 minutes, this application will be migrated to the cloud. So we saw the first part, which is a virtual machine, which is infrastructure as a service. The second we saw, which is platform as a service, which was a web app, which is right now happening. And then we will move to the third. So meanwhile, just 1 minute, 2 minutes for this to complete. Any questions? Anyone? Feel free to ask questions. I can't see the question, but if you have,
Mayur, there is a question.
Yeah, tell me.
This one is related to the scenario which you are showing. This one is coming from Rishabh Jain. He is asking, similar to what you are demonstrating, consider if we want to move an application from on-prem to web app, and the web app on the on-prem uses SQLDB. Shall we first migrate SQLDB over to Azure in case we don't want to expose on-prem SQL to Azure? So I think you briefly covered that, saying you can use hybrid connection, but maybe you want to elaborate that a little bit?
Yeah. So you have both the options. You can migrate the database as well as the application to the cloud. You can keep the database on premises, move the application to the cloud. You can move database to the cloud and keep the application on premises. You have all the different options. Now you can see we have migrated this website. Now let me quickly show you one thing. So when I migrate this application, so this is the, okay. Let me refresh this. We created this MSSUG Migrate, right? We just now created this website. I can go over here and I can go to the configuration. Ideally, you should be using Key Vault or similar service, but you can add a connection string right over here. So let's say you migrated the application and now you don't want to make any changes to the application, but just add a database. You can add a connection string over here. And you can, use that application. So database on premises or database moved. Anyways, database will have a connection string. You can put it over here, or you can modify the code as well. So you have the option. Let's say you want to move only the application first, then database. You can do that. Okay. It depends on the application. It depends on the scenario. It depends on the data as well. It depends on the company, the budgeting as well. Yeah, definitely.
So one quick question, like what advantage do we have? For example, one of the options that we have is to push the code, like deploy from the code. Let's say we have the code hosted on GitHub. So use the GitHub code into the deployment center, and then use that code to spin up the web app. And what you have shown is using the app service migrate. So
right.
What are the advantages the app service migrate is giving us here?
So consider this. I have the application already running, which I want to migrate. Probably I don't have access to the source code, probably. Okay. So I'm using this tool. But if you have access to the source code and you're like, hey, I want to migrate and I also want to set up the entire CI/CD pipeline, go ahead, do it from the GitHub. I would love if you do that. Okay. In that case, probably you don't need this. You can just set up a CI/CD, create a web app, set up a CI/CD pipeline, and say that, hey, GitHub, push it directly to the web app. Here are the credentials. You can do that. Yes, do that, please. I would be happy. Okay. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's right. But so in case, for example, we use the app service migrate, and in that case, the code.
I lost you. Hello. Is it just me?
Yeah,
hello?
You are audible.
Okay. So let's do one thing. I will just type in the question. I will answer that question at the end. Let's go to the next, the third migration that I want to show. And then probably at the end, we will take the questions. So, okay, sorry about that. So we just saw that how we can migrate an existing application to the virtual machine, infrastructure as a service. We just saw how we can migrate the application to a web app, which is a platform as a service. And the third that we're going to talk about is how we can migrate the application to the cloud in a serverless fashion. So when we say serverless, it is like, it's not like serverless. It doesn't mean that you don't have a server over there. There is a server, but it is in a shutdown state. You can consider that. So when you execute a function, the server boots up, it executes, and again it shuts down. Consider like that. Okay. So Microsoft has Power Automate, Logic App, functions, which falls under the serverless bucket. You have to choose what suits you. For example, Power Automate is good for internal only applications. Azure Function is very code heavy. Logic App is designer orchestration tool, which allows you to drag and drop controls and create a workflow. So it's up to you what you want to use. So as I mentioned, Power Automate, Logic App, and functions. We have these three options. Functions support C#, JavaScript, Python, Java, PowerShell. So you can write code and execute. These are event-driven and trigger-based. For example, you can have a cron job, like say every 7 a.m. in the morning, do a backup, something like that. Or you can have HTTP requests. So whenever somebody hits the particular endpoint, execute or start the virtual machine, do something, and then shut down the virtual machine. You can do that. Or you can also have connected triggers. For example, whenever somebody makes an entry in a SharePoint list, do something. So you can use the connected triggers. It automatically scales in and scales out as and when required. So you can have like thousands of virtual machines provisioned just for 1 second to execute that function and then shut down automatically. So you pay only for that execution. You can have Azure functions in a consumption plan, premium plan, or app service plan, and you can decide what to use depending on the costing factor. Now, remember one thing, when I say serverless, my personal suggestion is typically you should use serverless when you have a fire and forget situation, like I told you, right? So I'm just sending my data like my serial number, my asset tag, and model to this particular function. It will execute, it will store, and it will shut down. So these like scenarios you can use serverless. If suppose your job is going to let's say 10-15 minutes, going to run for 10-15 minutes, probably you want to use something else, not the serverless. So that decision matrix, we will come back to it again. The decision matrix will help you a lot while making the decision about choosing the right technology. Now, let me quickly show you a demo of serverless. So what I have done is here on the dashboard, I have created this logic app. What it does is it's a simple logic app. I don't want to create a website again, okay, for registering this. So what I did, I created a logic app. This is the designer for logic app, okay. And in that designer, what I have done is first created a form. So this is my form, Excel form. Let's see how simple it is. By the way, here we are coming to re-architect. So I'm kind of re-architecting my application. I don't want that entire stack to run just for filling up this one form, right? I don't want that over engineering. So this is a simple form. So here I created this form which asks for a model. Let me just say go in a preview mode. Let's say the model is Samsung Gear M3, something like that. Serial number is 2222 something. Okay. Asset tag is 2222 something. Okay. And say submit. So when I do that, it saves this to an Excel file. For that, what I have done is I have added a trigger. Sorry. So this is over here. So whenever a new response is submitted, I get the response detail and I insert into the database. Now, if I go to the overview, you can see it just ran for 758 milliseconds. So if I go over here, okay, you can see the details. So this is the form that was submitted. These are the responses. So you can see Samsung Gear. These are the details that I added. And here the row is being added to the SQL Server. Now, if you want to check or cross-verify this, I can just refresh this page. Ta-da, it's here. The same I can do over here in this particular application. And you should be able to see it, right? So this is what this is how you can move your application from one platform to other platform. Now I am coming back to this other options again. So We saw virtual machines. We saw app service. We saw logic app. Okay. Similarly, I could run this as Azure function. If suppose this is the ASP.NET Core application, so I can containerize it and run it in a container. That is also doable. I can also create a container and run it in Kubernetes. But I'm not the expert on Kubernetes, and Nilesh probably would love to take this session. So we can move this application to the containers Kubernetes service as well. So here you have to look at this decision matrix and see, okay, what exactly I have to do. So that for that reason you have to ask this question, which I asked you at the first. Why are you migrating? If you have answers to those questions, and if you have those details, you can use this decision matrix to select the end target, and you can deploy your application over there, and you can have that plan, and then later on you can govern that application, monitor that application, and do other stuff. Now, couple of things. Here I'm ending my presentation, and I'm opening up for Q&A. But before that, there are quick references. So there is the cloud adoption framework that I talked about. There is this bit.ly link that I have created. You can go and visit. It's good to go through at least once, so you have idea about like how the applications are migrated to the cloud. There is also an Azure migration program available. So if you have like too much workload, probably you may want to contact Microsoft about it and see if suppose Microsoft can help you out to migrate those applications. And luckily, tomorrow on 24th September, there is a session by one of my colleague Nish and Gaurav Seth on Ask Me Anything. So if you have any questions, shoot at them. Okay. So this is the bit.ly link that I have created. And that's pretty much from my side. And we can open up for questions. Yes.
Yeah, we do have some follow-up questions
Right.
to what Rajat was asking regarding the SQL database. So I see this familiar face and familiar name rather. Thank you, Irakli sir, for coming to our meetups regularly and asking these interesting questions. He's got a couple of them, or maybe it's a follow-up. So let me read the first one. If I want to have high availability for my database in active mode across two regions, does Azure provide native managed service, or I have to resort to creating VMs with database inside?
So we depends. So if suppose what database you are using, what is the version of that database? For example, MySQL or SQL Server, right? So what database you are using, and then if you go with the platform as a service, by default Microsoft will give you this the SLA for high availability. But still, you can go ahead and have a replication enabled, and you can have like this data, replicated at two different regions. So you can do that. I believe MySQL provides. If you go for a platform as a service, Microsoft provides the SLA and replication by default for MySQL, or otherwise at least there is the option if I'm not wrong. Okay, but it depends. You can go ahead and check the documentation. I'm not a database expert as such, but these options are available.
Okay, and I think the follow-up questions to that was just to clarify, active / standby is common knowledge or usage. I'm more interested specifically in active type of database server deployment, and if such deployment is supported, how the state is synchronized across regions. Sorry, Mayur, you're on mute.
Sorry about this. My headphone just got disconnected. So I'm not a database expert. So what I will do is I will, check internally and get back to you. Probably, just write to me at this Twitter handle, or drop me an email, and I will check and I will get back to you.
Okay. I think, as you said, Mayur, the replication is there. You can replicate the data.
Right.
For active database, there is always on feature in
Yes.
SQL Server. So you can create a group of servers, and you can create what is called as, I think, the always on or always active feature at the SQL Server level. That's possible. Right. But I'm not sure it's available in other databases.
That's why my question was like, which database, which version, right? So we need to have that kind of information, and then probably we can suggest. Yeah.
Then there was one from Vicom Chick. He's asking, I understand there is an auto shutdown of VM, but I can't find auto startup function. Is this available on the portal?
I don't see it available on the portal, but nobody stops you from creating a runbook or a function which will automatically start the virtual machine, right? That should be doable.
Okay. There is a question from Rajat Gupta. What are the limitations of serverless Azure functions?
I don't see limitations, but I see the use cases where exactly you will use it. So as I mentioned that I will typically use Azure function in a fire and forget situations, like just execute and forget about it. Okay, if you are doing lot of work in one function, probably not. It's not a good idea to do it, right? So rather than that, use the web apps or web jobs for that. If you are transcoding videos, if you are processing large amount of data, which is going to take like let's say 10 minutes or more, it doesn't make sense at all to go in a Azure function. So rather use the web app or a batch job for doing that. So I don't see limitation. I see that okay, depending on the use case, we should use the right technology. So there is a saying, right? When you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. But then you shouldn't be, hammering everywhere. So that's how it is. That's my personal thought process. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't have any other questions in the Teams chat. Let me check on YouTube.
Oh, I was on YouTube as well. Yeah. You made me famous. Thanks, Nilesh.
No problem, sir. It's always a pleasure having you. Yep. Is there anybody who wants to ask a question by unmuting yourself instead of typing it in the chat? We still have a couple of minutes, so maybe a couple more questions can be answered if you have any. Looks like
so.
Yeah.
I have one question, Nilesh.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, hi, Mayur.
Hi.
Myself, Kasim. Thanks for the session. My only one, I had one question. It was regarding the migration itself. Like we have, a huge sets of reference documents and all those stuffs when it comes to an application moving it to the cloud. So, what all documents or what you suggest should be the best, kind of we can refer into when we are trying to have a when we are trying to prepare kind of checklist. Okay, we need to move so and so application to cloud, and this should be this reference site or this resource should be the best to go for it. Apart from the docs and all stuff, because it's a very huge and it's very scattered all around. So
Right.
that's the reason. Yeah.
Right. So that's why I brought up the references link back here. So the first thing that you need to visit is the cloud adoption framework. So here it will give you like, what you need to assess, what questions you need to ask, how do you need to plan. So there are like wealth of resources available in Microsoft CAF. I will highly recommend that. And there are some free ebooks, if I'm not wrong, available on Microsoft site where you can download these PDFs, ebooks, and there is one I believe on migration as well, ASP.NET, something like that. So you can follow that as well. There are also courses available, but pretty much you have to first understand why you are moving, what is the current landscape, and what is your end target. So like what you want to achieve, and also the timeline also matters. Like if suppose you are migrating, like let's say you don't have time, you have to migrate in just 2 days. Okay, in that case you have to you don't have much options. It's just rehost. So you just have to move the virtual machine from on-premises to the cloud. But if suppose you have time, let's say 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, and you have the capacity, you have people around you, like who can help you out with the migration process or re-architecting. When you are migrating, and if you have time, it makes sense to make a utilization of that time and uh, build something which is scalable, build something which is more secure, highly available, so you can do that. So yeah, the CAF should help you out.
Yeah, there are a couple of links which I've pasted in the chat. I think one which referred by Mayur was that the cloud migration checklist. It's part of Microsoft Docs, and there is another GitHub repo which contains another readiness checklist for cloud migration. So you can have a look at these two.
Yeah, thanks, Nilesh. Thanks, Mayur.
So one quick question. For example, let's say we decide, for example, the demo that you gave for moving on-premises app to app service. So how do we decide which service tier will be correct for us to for during the initial phase of migration? How do we do the assessment of choosing the right service tier?
So there is this service within Azure called as Azure Migrate, okay,
Right.
which helps you to do the assessment. And while doing the assessment, it will tell you what is the right size, okay, or what is the nearest size that is available in Azure. So it can help you out with that. There are also some third-party vendors, ISVs, who have built this migration services, and they can be consumed within the Azure Migrate service on Azure. So you can do that. But definitely, if you have something on premises, let's say 4 gigahertz, 2 CPU, 32 GB, something similar should be available. But then you have to think about like how much is the utilization. Doesn't make sense to use the same virtual machine which you have on premises to use on the cloud. Considering you can think about, let's say, the scalability factor, you can think about the availability factor, and you can say that, hey, probably I will get the small virtual machine, and if required, I will add another instance of it. Okay, so you can do that as well. So sizing also matters. So yeah, I will suggest that use the Azure Migrate tool and the sizing, the assessment over there. It should help you out with the assessment, and it will give you the right suggestions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, that's it for the day. So thank you. Thanks, Mayur. Thanks for taking time and giving us this wonderful session. I hope we will have many more from you in the coming days. This is not the last one, obviously.
Definitely, I love Singapore. I miss Singapore actually. So I would love to conduct more webinars. Definitely.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Nilesh.
No problem.
And,
My pleasure to have you as part of this, UG. So on behalf of my fellow organizers, Saktis and Tamil and Rivut, I thank all of you joining this session. And I hope that you will join us again next week when we have the Gophers, the what is there for Go developers on Azure. That's an interesting topic, and hopefully I will see all of you there. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.